welcome to another exciting episode of the Number One Comics Podcast. I'm your host, Jonah, and with me, as always, is Bill.
How you doing?
Bill, how are you doing?
I'm great, Jonah.
Good. Thanks for being here again.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate it. Well, as you can see, we are talking about a 90s gem. I don't know if you can call it a 90s gem. It's definitely a 90s comic, and that is Nomad. Now, before we get into this, real quick, I want to thank everyone at the Field of Geeks Network for helping make this episode happen. I want to thank Raven X for the awesome theme song music that we use. I want to thank all of you for tuning in and checking us out. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. You can also find us, wherever you get your podcasts. Just look up Field of Geeks Network, and you'll find us. Also, follow us on Facebook. We're available there as well.
Yeah.
So as you saw, and as I'd mentioned, we are talking about Nomad. Nomad was published by Marvel Comics in cover date November of 1990, and this has a $1.50 cover price on it. Written by Fabian Nicieza, and art was by James Fry III. Were you familiar with Nomad as kind of a child of the 90s as well? Were you familiar with
through trading cards?
Through trading cards? Okay.
Yeah, remember the only thing I knew about him was that he looked like Mad Max and he had a baby on his back.
Yep. For anyone who has tuned into this episode or more than one episode, you will come to find that we got a lot of our introductions through trading cards. So you're going to hear that probably time and time again.
Right.
And yes, I do remember once we get into the ongoing, he does have a baby that he carries with him to fight crime. Okay. We'll talk. I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit.
Apparently CPS wasn't a thing in the 90s.
And we will probably cover that issue at some point in time as well. So, so Nomad, in my opinion, he's like the ultimate underdog, right? He's a character that he's had one mini and a pretty short ongoing. He's got a really convoluted backstory with a lot of retcons, which I think we'll touch on. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely an underdog in my opinion.
Yeah.
He first appeared as Bucky, which Captain America's sidekick, in Captain America 153. Now, his first adventures as Captain America's sidekick took place in the 1950s, at the time, which was at the time when they were published, essentially.
Right.
Years later, in Avengers number 4, which was published in 1964, that was revealed that the real Captain America had been in suspended animation. I'm sure you guys have seen the movie or heard the stories at this point. In that the original Bucky had died. So, for years, those 1950s stories had become considered like non-canonical. Like they weren't part of the story's canon. Now, Steve Englehart established that those stories followed Jack Monroe as Bucky with William Burnside as Captain America. So they basically followed a different Bucky and a different Captain America, essentially bringing them back into canon and saying, hey, no, they happened. It was just two different guys.
Right.
We could actually spend an entire episode just on William Burnside, a.k.a. Bad Cap. But we don't really have time for that.
Right.
At one point, it was established that there was a second Bucky in 1945, I think it was, named Fred Davis, which that technically makes Monroe here the third Bucky.
Right.
Now, the third Bucky and Bad Cap, as I'll refer to him as, they spent several years in suspended animation themselves. They were revived eventually. The revived Bad Cap is brainwashed and becomes a character called the Grand Director. Bucky, which actually he ends up as the Grand Director, he ends up shooting Bucky, and then apparently takes his own life. Bucky was resurrected a few years later in Captain America 281, which was like early 80s, like 1983. And that is where he's actually first named Jack Monroe. So this guy had been around for 40 years before he was ever given like a proper first name.
Right.
And Steve Rogers, who was, back as Captain America at the time, he gives Jack the name Nomad, and Nomad becomes Steve's partner for the next few years. So like I said, for a guy that has like less than 30 issues total, like in his name, he's got a really convoluted backstory.
Well, and he's not even technically the first Nomad, correct? Because at some point, Steve Rogers was
Nomad for a time.
Yeah.
And then when he, brought in Jack, he gave Jack that moniker.
Right.
So Monroe was first featured on his own in an issue of Marvel Comics Presents. So that's kind of when he first got his first solo story, so to speak. Right. And then about a year and a half later, this miniseries dropped. Let's talk about the cover. It features Nomad in the foreground. He's got a shotgun. It's smoking. His ponytail is flowing. He's got sunglasses on, despite it clearly being dark out. In the background, we've got a cool silhouette of like shadowy Captain America watching over him. The cover states that Captain America is the guest star, which the cover also declares this: he's found his own way to fight for the American dream, and he's got the hardware to do it. Which is pretty funny. It's pretty cool. The cover is very early 90s, like late 80s, early 90s cover.
Right.
But I dig it. Any thoughts on the cover, or on any thoughts on the character before?
I definitely dig it. I mean, the character himself, he's kind of like Patrick Swayze meets the Punisher.
I could see that. Yeah.
Very, very much 90s, and I think that's a lot of what Nicieza had fun with.
Yeah.
In the comic itself.
Yeah. Ponytails were very big in 1990. My dad had a ponytail. I had a ponytail.
Well, you think of like the antagonist from Kindergarten Cop, Terry Silver from Karate Kid 3,
Steven
Seagal. I think even what's his name, Jean-Claude Van Damme had one in some of his movies. I don't know.
Wow, hold on, I don't recall Van Damme ever having.
Maybe that's a Mandela effect I'm thinking of, like the Sinbad Kazam movie or whatever it is.
Shazam. It's real. Right. I've seen it. I have a bootleg version of it on VHS. No, that's a lie. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the issue itself. Let's get inside. Inside the cover page, we start off, and I want to point this out because this is something I love about comics of this era. We start off with an ad for Wrath of the Black Manta, the Nintendo game, and I freaking loved that game.
Yeah.
Now, technically speaking, our story opens in Miami, where a young woman is running from two armed men. She hits a dead end and is blasted from behind by a shotgun. The men are about to finish her off when Nomad intervenes. He uses a golden disc to disarm one of the shooters. He then drop kicks the other one in the chest. Nomad wants to know why they're after the girl, and he presumes they're either dealers or pimps, which he's definitely making a snap judgment on her.
Right.
Anyway, his narrative reads in part like a hard-boiled detective story with lines like, "Me and Miami go together like apple pie and semi-automatic machine guns." The attacking men resist, but Nomad makes quick work of them, even kneecapping one of them with a shotgun of his own. The girl is alive, but barely. Before he gets her to an emergency room, she tells him the person responsible for this attack was a man named Umberto Safilios. At the hospital, the girl's family arrives. They learn her spinal column has been severed, but she may survive. Her father thanks Nomad. Nomad also learns that Safilios is the father's brother-in-law, which makes that the girl's uncle. The father states that Safilios had been pressuring his daughter to steal info for him from an electronics hardware company that she works for called Cyber Optics. Nomad decides to check out Cyber Optics by breaking into it. He discovers she was set to meet a DEA agent named Joseph Kittle. Security finds Nomad inside, and he has to escape. Once he's outside the walls of the cyber optics installation, Nomad is knocked to the ground by none other than Captain America and his shield. The captain has stepped in, vouching for Nomad with the security people. Nomad and Captain America chat briefly. The captain acts like an unapproving big brother, feeling that Nomad is crossing the line. Following his encounter with Captain America, Nomad heads towards Sunset Isles, which was noted as the meeting place of DEA agent Kittle. The Isles is a boat marina, and Nomad finds a warehouse, which had also been noted. Inside, he finds ammo magazines and Stinger missiles, because it's late 80s, early 90s when every bad guy warehouse has Stinger missiles.
Right.
It just reminds me of the Navy SEALs movie.
Yeah.
With the Stinger missiles. Anyway, the girl's father and DEA agent Kittle arrive at the warehouse, and so Nomad eavesdrops on their chat. Their convo leaves Nomad with more questions than answers. The clues lead Nomad to a go-go joint called Lollipops, which is a fantastic name for a strip club. Leaving his gear behind, Nomad enters the club. He orders a Rolling Rock and finds a booth. Hector, the girl's father, arrives first. Shortly after, Kittle and two others arrive. Hector and his brother-in-law Sifilios emerge from a back room shortly thereafter. Hector is carrying a briefcase. Kittle and his men follow them out. Outside, a truck pulls up. Sifilios opens up the back of it. The DEA agents make their move, revealing Hector's double cross to Sifilios. Sifilios shoots Hector, killing him. Kittle returns fire. Nomad decides to join the fray. He knocks out Kittle. He then injures Sifilios, but the bad guy's able to escape in a truck after he shoots the bystander in the face, and then uses one of the go-go girls as a human shield. There's a lot that goes on in those couple of panels.
Right.
Nomad shoots the tires on the truck, and it careens off the cliff, where it explodes on the rocks below. We'll talk about that more in a moment. Because for some reason, there's always the cliff that's right there that the truck's got to fly off of.
Of course.
And explode. Anyway. Where was I? Oh, yeah. The truck falls off the side of the cliff. It explodes into a ball of flame. Blah, blah, blah. Nomad takes a map that had been tossed from the truck cab and also the case of money that was in the briefcase, and he heads to the hospital. The girl's mother is told that her daughter will live but never walk again. Nomad hands the briefcase of money to the mother to help her daughter's recovery and reveals it was her husband's dying wish that she receive it. Nomad takes his clues that he'd gathered, which includes the map, the shipping label, and he heads to his next stop, Lexington, Kentucky. Now, a few days later, there's a secret meeting. It's taking place with the National Security Council's Superpowers Commission. And Nomad is the topic of the discussion. They discuss that this guy's interfering with government operations and that he needs to be investigated so that they can figure out how to handle him. And from there, it is to be continued. Dun, dun, dun. What are your thoughts?
I mean, this is like a 90s action movie in comic book form.
100%.
It's, if you love like cheesy 90s action, this is the comic for you.
Yeah,
Definitely
if you grew up watching movies like Dead Bang with Don Johnson, or any number of the Seagal movies we've mentioned, or Jean-Claude Van Damme movies we've mentioned.
Yeah.
Yes. Even throw in some American Ninja in there. This would definitely be right up your alley. It does read like a late 80s episode of like Miami Vice or some similar detective procedural show.
Yeah.
Right? He even talks like a noirish detective, which I think is very funny because nothing else about this screams noir other than his own inner monologue.
Right.
Like, you take a guy who thinks he's in a noir TV show and you put him in like a contemporary modern day drama, it's gonna come off very strange.
Yeah.
And that's what's done here, which I think I don't think it's intentionally meant to be funny, but it's very funny to me.
It's not intentional, but I know Nicieza really had some fun with it. He wanted to put in as many like detective cliches as he could.
There are some things that they say in here where I'm like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like, there was a word, I don't know if I've got it noted here, but I had to look it up and it's nothing. What was it? I'll find it. I'll come across it. It's in the issue. But yeah, so it is funny that he does come across like this, detective noir, though he's neither. I guess maybe he is a detective. I mean, he's definitely doing some detecting in this, or some detective work in this. Mm-hmm. He's definitely established as a street level hero, dealing with gun smuggling operations as opposed to taking on a supervillain. He does take out a few thugs early on. He does the detective work. He gets lectured by Captain America, whose guest appearance is really just kind of a throwaway guest appearance. I mean, he wasn't really necessary in this.
Right.
And he really lent nothing to the story. I think Nomad could have handled the security guys without Captain America stepping in.
Right.
And then really, I think what it does, too, is it just kind of undermines Nomad as a leading character when he's getting treated like almost like a child.
Right.
By the guest star.
Yeah.
One thing, too, with these 90s comics is, especially when you take a lesser known character, is you've got to throw in that guest star. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
That was.
There are exceptions, which, you take a look at something like a Sleepwalker or Darkhawk or Ghost Rider. There are exceptions to that.
Right.
But it was pretty prevalent in the 90s. The art is all right. Some of the panels look really good. Mm-hmm. Like, especially when like Nomad takes out the one bad guy's knee early on with that shotgun blast. I thought that looked dope.
Yeah.
The end, though, especially the shootout at the end and all the action at the end, it got a little messy for me to follow. Mm-hmm. I went over the thing like 4 or 5 times because I totally even missed the panel where like the girl's father gets shot and killed by his brother-in-law.
It's funny you mentioned that because I had to go back and look at it like, what do you mean? His dying wish is
I was like, when did he die?
Yeah.
And then I was like, who's this random dude getting shot in the face? Like, he's standing there with a couple of like a couple of working girls or dancers, and he just gets like shot in the face for like no reason. Anyway, it got a little messy and tough for me to follow. Mm-hmm. I think it felt kind of rushed.
Yeah.
I had to read it a few times to figure out, like I said, when Hector got killed. And also, I'm still unsure what Hector's plan even was and what the DEA's plan was. Mm-hmm. Now, I noticed that, like, Nomad was confused by it as well, where he's like, I don't really know what's going on. Neither do we as readers. Like, we have no idea what the actual, like, what this operation actually was. Because, like, when Nomad intervenes, he knocks Kittle out and is like, Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Like, who's this DEA guy that you just like assaulted?
Right.
So anyway, it is to be continued. So maybe more of that will be revealed. Once he gets to Kentucky. Mm-hmm. I won't spoil anything. I have read the miniseries. I've actually read the entire ongoing as well, but no spoilers here. You have to read this issue to find out for yourself, and read the next issue to find out for yourself.
Right.
Any other thoughts that you had on the issue itself?
Well, I did kind of do a little bit of digging into the character just to find out some more backstory on him, because, of course, now after reading this, I'm like, whatever happened to this guy? Because he was everywhere in the 90s.
He's got a sad story.
He does. He actually has an encounter with the original Bucky.
He does.
And I don't know if we want to spoil that necessarily.
No, we will, because we're going to talk about what comes next here, so we are definitely going to spoil it.
But one of the things that's kind of unique about him is usually you see like one of these solo series like this, especially with him being associated with Captain America, you assume he's going to go up against like Red Skull or Crossbones or one of those supervillain kind of things, and he more so deals with like homelessness, drug dealers, hate crimes.
Yeah.
He even deals with AIDS at one point.
Yep.
In this run, or not, maybe not necessarily in this run, but as a character.
I think, yeah, as a character as a whole, like in this run, yes, and then even when you get into his main series, I think if memory serves me correctly, because it's been a hot minute since I've read it, but like his real brush with a legit villain is the Dead Man's Hand crossover with like Daredevil.
Oh, okay.
Which pits him against like Tombstone. Is like a villain in that.
Right.
And so there's a little bit of that, but one thing that I think does not help this character, and we've said it before, is your good guy is only as interesting as your bad guys, right? Mm-hmm. And when you don't have a very interesting set of bad guys, your main character is not very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so not having a defined bad guy, arc enemy, whatever. I mean, I don't remember I don't recall them ever bringing back like, Bad Cap, but he would, the grand director. Is it director or dictator?
I think it was director, but
anyway,
I could be wrong.
That could have been like a cool, like arch nemesis type thing to bring back. And maybe they did. And I missed it again. It's been years since I've read it.
Right.
But he definitely needed a better rogues gallery.
Yeah.
He just didn't really have that.
Yeah.
So this 4-issue miniseries, it really serves as a prologue to what was really a short living ongoing. It just ran over 2 years. It ran about 25 issues from 92 to 94. That series included that, crossover I mentioned with Daredevil and Punisher. It's called Dead Man's Hand. I have the trade of that. It's actually pretty fun. It ended with Nomad. His series ended with Nomad being believed dead. He did pop up again, though, in 2001. It was revealed that he'd been placed back into suspended animation, was revived, and then brainwashed into being a new version of the Scourge. Now, the Scourge is a kind of a character that goes back years, that he was a vigilante that killed bad guys. And he targeted supervillains is what he did. So it wasn't like the Punisher killing everybody. The Scourge specifically targeted supervillains. And I believe as the Scourge, he took on the Thunderbolts. He was defeated. He was freed from the brainwashing eventually, and then he kind of like disappeared again until what you were talking about.
Yeah.
When he appears again in Brubaker's Captain America run, which introduced us to the Winter Soldier, aka the original Bucky.
Right. As
the Winter Soldier, he unceremoniously kills off Nomad and like shoves him in the trunk of a car.
Right.
And that's really the last you see of Nomad is he's dead in the trunk of a car.
Yeah.
Man, I tell you what, this guy just could not catch a break.
He couldn't.
Between the retcons, the backstory, the fact that he suffered from like towards the end with the super soldier serum, it was like breaking him down physically and mentally. The brainwashing, getting killed off and shoved in the trunk of a car. It's like Marvel never really knew what to do with this guy or even really liked him as a character much.
Right.
And I think they did him dirty because I think there is a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
I understand that when you bring back the original Bucky, any other Bucky's redundant. And so I can understand that aspect of it, but I think that there was more they could have done with Nomad. I think that, especially what we see kind of in this first mini, I understand, again, it's a product of its time, and if this was a product of, say, today, or the last 10 years, Nomad would be not a noir dressed up as a superhero, it'd be like a Taylor Sheridan-esque modern day Western.
Right.
And I think that would be much cooler and probably better received by the audience as a whole. So, here's the word that I was like, what the hell does that even mean? One guy calls somebody a cheap jackpug. And I'm like, what the hell is a cheap jackpug? And can we possibly bring that back? I looked this thing up on like Urban Dictionary's I looked this thing up all over the place. I could not find the meaning of the word cheap jackpug. If I ever get a chance to interview the author, the great Fabian Nicieza, who I love his work.
Oh, yeah.
Especially as a child of the 90s. I want to be like, okay, dude, what is a cheap jackpug? That was the last thing I had to say about that. Yeah. Any final thoughts on the poor Nomad?
I probably, picking this up in the 90s and even today, I don't know that I would necessarily feel the need to read the whole run.
No.
But
I don't even know that I would have felt the need to read the whole miniseries.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those where we're given this mystery, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not laid out to me in such a way that I really want to know what happens next.
Yeah.
It's more of like, by the end of it, I was like, by the end of it, I was just like, what happened? But not care enough to find out what happened next. There's no, even with the very end of it where you leave off with this panel and they're like, we got to figure out what to do with this guy. Even that's not enough of a cliffhanger for me to be like, well, what are they going to do with him? Yeah. And maybe that's the problem with Nomad as a character, is maybe that's kind of everybody's take on him, is just like, eh. Like, I hate the term meh, but it is very much that.
It is.
So it was an interesting read.
This was, you have to understand too, this was during a time where Marvel was basically just throwing anything at the wall to see what stuck.
Yes.
And,
I think they still do that sometimes.
Well, yeah, I mean, they very much do, but this was during the time where we got so many, fabulous first issues, and which makes a great podcast for us. As we've talked about,
there's a lot of material to pull from.
We've talked about guys like Solo and, Sleepwalker, Darkhawk, Super Pro.
We haven't reviewed
Super Pro yet, but that's one I definitely want to do. But that was very much, it seemed like every week I was going to the comic book store, there was a new number one of somebody.
100, yes. And that's one of the reasons why, as a young teen because I was 10 in 1990 when this came out. Mm-hmm. And this miniseries actually came out before I started reading comics, like, religiously. Mm-hmm. By the time his ongoing series came out, because I didn't collect those issues until I was like well into adulthood. Mm-hmm. By the time his ongoing series came out, I was already buying things like, again, it was like Darkhawk, Ghost Rider, X-Force, Cable, X-Men, Spider-Man when I could.
Yeah.
My pull list kept getting bigger and bigger, but my allowance never changed.
Right,
so
exactly.
There was things that would not have made the cut. Nomad was one of those that did not make the cut.
Right.
At the time. And
right.
Today, if Marvel was to put out if they're to bring Nomad back in a Nomad series, I'd pick up the first issue. But I don't know if it'd have to be really good to get me to keep going back to it.
Yeah.
But again, with characters with the Winter Soldier, who's no longer even called the Winter Soldier anymore.
Right.
He's now called the Revolution, which I think is a stupid name.
Right.
We'll just call him Bucky Barnes. When Barnes came back, you don't need Jack Monroe, sadly.
Right.
Marvel realized that. I'm sure he has his fans, but and I dig the guy.
Well, and I hate to make the comparison, but it's almost like, when Jason Todd came back, mm-hmm. and he'd been gone for years or whatever, he didn't just immediately go and kill No,
I mean, they reintroduce him. Yeah, they reintroduce him, and then they Hush, and everyone thinks he's well. Everyone calls him out as Hush, so I think DC's like, no, he's not Hush, and then they make somebody else Hush.
Yeah,
but
this is sadly one of those characters in Marvel's vault that I don't think we'll ever get a retcon or anything like that of
bring him back alive.
Yeah,
I don't think so either. What's weird to me is how they choose with this character. They're like, he's redundant. We don't need another one Leica, or we don't need two Buckies or whatever. Yet we've got multiple Captain Americas running around. You got Steve Rogers as Captain America. You got Sam Wilson as Captain America in the comics. You've got Bucky, who was Captain America for a time. Yeah. You've got how many fucking Spider-Man running around?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll talk about John Walker, because I love me some John Walker. But how many Spider-Man do you have running around?
Yeah. And now we've got...
just because you introduce Miles Morales doesn't mean that all of a sudden Peter Parker is superfluous.
Yeah.
And you got to kill him off. Now, yes, it's unfair to compare Jack Monroe to Peter Parker. I get that.
Exactly.
But my point is, Marvel... and this I think is like one of my biggest complaints about Marvel characters is there's so many derivative characters out there. Mm-hmm. We don't need so many of the exact same character running around.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they pick and choose who they find redundant and decide to kill off, again, that's why I think that they did him dirty, because there's definitely room for Jack Monroe to still be running around as Nomad.
Oh yeah.
When you've got 6 Spider-Mans and you've got however many, there was a time when you've got like multiple Wolverines.
Yeah.
And there's a whole army of Deadpools.
Yeah.
Like, you can't tell me that that one more Bucky is too much.
Yeah. So exactly.
Bring Nomad back. Do him right. Anything else to add?
No, that's all I got.
All right, you cheap jack plug. We're going to take off. My apologies if that's a terrible insult. It's like the C word.
Oh, no.
Well, that's going to do it for us here today. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for walking through Nomad with us. Join us next time. Hit and subscribe. Hit the like button, subscribe. I'm going to get all this down. I'm not very technologically savvy, so I'm going to fuck this up every time. On YouTube, you can like and subscribe.
Yes. You
can download and subscribe to our podcasts and listen to those. Just look up Field of Geeks for both of those things, and you'll find us.
Yep.
You can look up the #1 Comics Podcast. I have to scroll through a lot of fucking other shitty, not even like YouTube videos that are titled the #1 Comics Podcast. They are just have like a #1 in the title.
Yeah.
And I got to sort through those, but someday we'll shoot up to the top.
If you go to YouTube and just type in youtube.com/Field of Geeks, all one word.
Yes.
Then all the Field of Geeks stuff will pop up. You'll be able to find us on there.
Yeah, do that. That's way better than what I was saying. And then also follow us on Facebook. We got a Facebook page. It's cool.
Yeah.
So thanks again for joining us. We'll see you guys next time. I'm Jonah.
I'm Bill.
Oh, that was like a Field of Geeks ending.
It was.
That was unintentional.
Man, that was meta. No, I'm just kidding.
See you guys next time.
See ya.
Peace.